Cognitive distortions, yeah, is a big technical term, basically just for the way, a style of thinking that influences how you perceive the moment, that will then change the way you react to it.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, Mental Health and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the Behavioral Health Counseling Department, and this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is Telana Simpson. Telana is a courage coach and an author who helps people to find their authentic voice, to do outrageously courageous things, and to help with that sense sometimes of self-consciousness, of lacking in that self-competency that sometimes can creep in on any one of us. And I think that sometimes we can have this sense of, gosh, how do we cope with that, and how do we find that within ourselves? So I'm so glad to welcome Telana here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity. Lovely to be here.
So your ebook is Consciously Shine, and it's about overcoming self-consciousness. So we know what self-consciousness is in a general way, but can you tell us more about really what does that mean?
So the way I understand it, because I used to be extremely self-conscious. There's no ways I would have pitched up for this kind of interview years ago. It was just any kind of attention on me made me so aware of myself, and I was so concerned about how people were perceiving me that I would go blood red, but red, like. And then I would notice people around me were also feeling awkward, and they would just reinforce the embarrassment. But it wasn't that I was embarrassed. I was just so aware that everyone's looking at me. So that's how I experience self-consciousness. So with my own journey of trying to overcome that, and through my coaching and my training and doing that, I've come to see it as being aware of ourselves in the negative. So I talk about self-consciousness as like being on a continuum, and you can work this awareness of yourself in a negative way or in a positive way. So in the negative ways, where I've worked with people who get rashes right up their neck. So if they had to do a speech or go and present to the CEO, to their boss or something at work, they would spend weeks agonizing about it because they knew they would get a rash. They would even plan their wardrobes so that they're wearing scarves to try and hide it because they were so focused on their experience of needing to show up and speak up and, say something in front of other people. So that's how I see it, is we work that ability of ourselves to be aware of ourselves in the negative. We have all these uncomfortable experiences, and it's almost like there's a spotlight on us. Whereas if you work your awareness of the self in the positive, in the constructive side, it's good to be aware of yourself. It's good to know where you can improve and grow and how you do show up, and to be open to feedback and be able to just engage with people in their life and add your value. So for me, it's almost like turning that spotlight off you and shining your light. That's why I called the book Consciously Shine. How do you add your light to the subject matter, to the topic, to the conversation, to the relationship? So instead of it seen as an outside in, which makes us so aware of what's going on within ourselves, we shift that to an inside out approach, where we're here to add value And it's not about what people think about us. It's about adding your value, your opinion, your presentation, and getting feedback. There's no harm in people in giving you some input that you can then use to make things better the next time. So I don't know if I answered your question there quite broadly, but it's our awareness of ourselves. And if we work it in the negative, we have what most people come to understand as self-consciousness. Yeah.
How did you go from being self-conscious to being a courage coach? Like, how was your transition into that?
So I actually found the field of coaching almost by accident. I was looking for a job as a trainer, and the one job I got, they said, you're not going to be a trainer, you're actually going to be a coach. But coaching was so new. This was like 20 years ago. That when they put an ad looking for people, um, they would get sports coaches, and not like what we come to know today as life coaching, which is more a psychological process, right? So through that, I managed to get this job, and they introduced me to coaching, and I loved it. So I actually studied it further. And in that journey, I mean, that whole journey, I was still self-conscious. I was still, battling to speak up and show up and get very blush a lot when people are looking at me and asking me questions. But through that journey, I learned a lot of the foundational stuff that I have now incorporated into my model of, if you want to call it that, of overcoming self-consciousness. And I had some quite a serious health challenge, and through healing myself, so I went through in a process where I believe there's such a link between the mind and body. So we worked a lot on the physical side, so like what I ate, how much rest I got, obviously the medications that with the doctors, but I also worked on the mental side and the emotional side. And there I learned a lot more about all of what I talk about in terms of helping people be more courageous, and my fear of failure, my fear of confrontation. I mean, I was a peacemaker everywhere around me, to the extent that I think it led to the burnout, which contributed, to my health challenges. So I think through my own journey of that, and working with coaches that I had been trained by and was training with, so I had a number of coaches help me through my journey. I learned a lot about it, and only in hindsight, like going back, well, what shifted? What really helped me to overcome that and be much more okay with just showing up and now adding to the world in the best way that I can. Through looking back, I've come up with what's the structure of that, which is what the book is about. The thinking and dealing with the emotions, and part of it is also just getting a stronger sense of self-esteem, of understanding our how we've constructed our sense of self-worth. So that kind of journey, not only in me becoming a coach, but also then having to, present myself to the world as a coach and market myself and find clients, which triggered so much of that negative self-consciousness through that. And then I suppose I started to work with people because it's we usually teach what we most will need to learn. So I think just that understanding, working with so many people now who have had experiences of being negatively self-conscious, I've really been able to fine-tune that understanding, the structure of it, and how to shift out of it, how to develop our capacity. So yeah, it's a bit of studies, life, and my clients have taught me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of self-consciousness as a spectrum, because we talk about self-awareness, and self-awareness is so helpful and so useful to us, and brings us so much information. When we have information about ourselves, that is so helpful to us in building our lives and our worlds, and what boundaries we'll set and what we'll accept and all of that. And so, thinking about that as kind of one side of the spectrum, and then self-consciousness on the other side of that spectrum, and going, yeah, both of them have to do with ourselves. Both of them have to do with information about ourselves. And as I'm thinking through the two, it feels like self-consciousness really has to do with uh, things that are not proven to be real. So opinions of others that we have made up. Whereas self understanding or self awareness comes from opinions of others that we have not made up, right? That people have told us. So it comes from that real direct feedback.
Mm.
And comes from opinions of others, sure, but also comes from our own self-reflection of events that have happened and decisions that we've made and actions that we've taken and choices and the outcomes of those. And it's that real direct feedback that guides that self-knowledge and that self-understanding. And whereas self-consciousness on the other side of it has a lot to do with, okay, I think that they're thinking, right? Or what if they think this, or what if this happens? And there's a lot of unknown there, which is why it makes it that scary, that much scarier.
Absolutely. There's a lot of what we call cognitive distortions. So these are poor thinking styles that distort the way we see reality. And the one is the egocentric bias. So that is a big term for that feeling of the world kind of is revolving around me and everyone must see me and everyone is noticing what's going on. And as I said, it's like the spotlight's on you. There is no spotlight. Do you know what I mean? When you're in a meeting, it's not like there is one spotlight and it's shining on you. I tell a lot of people, with all the people I coach, everybody thinks the spotlight's on them. Do you know what I mean? Like you sit around a boardroom table, and I'm telling you now, if I go and whisper in everyone's ear, everyone will be so preoccupied with, oh, what are they thinking about me? It's my turn next. What am I going to say? You know, that's having this inward, your attention is within. Whereas the self-awareness, your attention is without. You may be aware of yourself. So you may, as you said, understand and know your strengths and weaknesses and be open to the feedback around that. But it's from a inside out kind of attention, and it just shifts things. When we understand, it's just a thinking style. And a thinking style, if you're aware of it, you can shift to a more useful thinking style, which is, let me wait for the real feedback before I imagine and mind read what they're thinking about me. Yeah.
Do you help teach that and change that way of thinking through your coaching? Like, what can people expect from your coaching sessions to kind of help change that mindset?
So I find I do like a mixture of coaching and training. I've actually found that it's very useful to teach the concept of a cognitive distortion. I know it's a big term, but there's no harm in us learning these things. But understanding it, and I think part of my knack, if people who work with me, they say I have a really nice way of explaining these complex things. But when you understand it's just a way of thinking, it's a habit that's been formed over years. I mean, I can see from, my growing up being shy and being told, why are you so shy? And then thinking there's something wrong with me. And then if I blush, you stop blushing and you don't need to be embarrassed. So you take on all of these things and it creates this thinking that, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question. So it's to help people understand that thinking styles, where they come from, but also to then develop the flexibility with our thinking styles. I believe, you can shift. You can hear, oh, is that useful? No. That whole way of walking through the world thinking the spotlight's only on you is not a very useful, constructive, or pleasant even way of engaging with the world. So if we can learn a more useful thinking style, and even some of these thinking styles are on, that spectrum, as you're saying, that continuum, as I call it, and access a more useful. So what I find is like it hardly ever happens, but if it does, that I can feel, oh look, I feel like everyone's looking at me. I'm like, hold on, that's not true. And I can catch it and shift to a more useful way of engaging with the world. Shift that out. What is it that I'm here to do? What's going on? Let me look at the world around me. Let me focus on what's going on. So Chris, I don't know if that explains. It's a bit of that teaching. So training, kind of giving people a framework, a model, saying this is what worked, as a way to think about this experience. And then you shift more into the coaching side, and the coaching is believing that they have the resources. Sometimes we just need to access our knowledge that we have a thinking style and to become aware of that. Oh, that's that thinking style. And then the coaching is, well, what's useful for you? Is that useful? When does it happen? When doesn't it happen? What would be more useful? How would you develop this as your way of thinking and being? So the coaching is more about helping people then apply and live it and come up with little exercises, because I also believe in this, that everything is a capacity that you need to just exercise and then it gets stronger. So the more you stay in self-consciousness, the stronger that becomes. The more you shift to the self-awareness side, the stronger that becomes. So yeah, working with me is a bit of theory, if you want to call it that, or models, or talking about, concepts and sharing what the best from the world of psychology and some really useful, interesting models and how the brain works and all of that. And then shifting, adding on the coaching, which is, how do you now make this real for you? How do you take this into your life? What is useful for you? In what context? Do you know what I mean? And yeah, coaching it into our mind, body, emotion system so it becomes our way of being.
Absolutely. I mean, a great exercise in the boardroom example you gave, right? Where the idea that and we do as children, right? We have this idea that everything is focused on us, and honestly, as children, a lot of things are focused on us. When I think about, my daughter, Chrissa's daughter, if we when we're children, a lot of things are focused on us when we're young, and so. The idea that, okay, nobody is watching, right? If we've got a critical parent, if we've got a critical system around us, right, at school or anything like that, there is this focus on, well, our behaviors, right? Our behavior, we need to learn, we need to be shaped, we need to do these things. And so, one great exercise to do with that is to think back to the last party you went to, the last meeting you went to, and try to name outfits, right? What was, first of all, who was there, right? At the very highest level, because can you name every person that was there? Okay, of the people you can name, what were they wearing, right? Can you tell me what color shoes each of the people were wearing, right? And then if you can, okay, great. Who was wearing earrings? How was their hair? What color was their shirt, right? And then tell me two things that each person said that night, right? Or during that meeting. And it's very difficult to do that in a group setting like that. And so kind of doing that and going, okay, let me think back. And then, oh, let me go to an event or a meeting and let me afterwards see what I can remember. And even when we're trying to remember those things, even when we're really paying attention and trying to remember, it's difficult because we still have other things that are happening. The presenter is speaking and there's noises in the room and there are all these other things. And so being able to see how we perceive other people can really help us with that part of us that thinks that other people perceive us much more strongly than we perceive
Then,
them.
then they actually
Um,
do, yeah.
yeah, and so I love that activity. And when you were talking about that egocentric bias, I was thinking about this example of my daughter. So she's 9. She's got to get out of the house for school at 7:55 if she's not going to be late for school. And so that's always kind of been an argument in the morning because she doesn't have to be there until 8:05. And so we'll say, hurry up, you're going to be late. You've got 5 minutes before you're going to be late. And she'll say, I'm not going to be late. Because the truth was, and what we figured out was, we needed her out of the house at 7:55 so that we wouldn't be late, right? When we come back. And so we finally got this figured out and we all talked about it together and we figured out, oh, okay. You are correct. You're not going to be late, but the morning doesn't revolve around your school schedule. We're going to be late. And so that was a big transition in her thinking in the mornings when she realized, like, oh, when you say we're going to be late, you don't mean, oh, I have to leave by 8 so that I'm not late for school. But if we leave by 8, we're late, my husband and I. So uh, that was a really great example for me, and I think for her of zooming out, right? Zooming out on the situation. And she was seeing her schedule
Yes.
and that was it. But there's three of us involved. And so zooming it out and saying, nope, we're not the only person in this situation, really, really helpful. So you talk also about confrontation, and that was an example of like a small confrontation. But tell us more about confrontation and how uh, the way that we feel about being perceived by others might impact our ability to have those healthy confrontations.
And I'm glad you said the healthy confrontation, because I do believe that and confrontation is an interesting word there, but you can have a healthy confrontation. When you confront, it means you're coming face to face with something, right? So the person who is confronting you is bringing the issue right here in your face. You can't avoid it. You need to deal with it. And if we are able to then deal with it in the most constructive way, we usually resolve it. We come out better the other side. So a healthy confrontation, to me, the benefits of it is one, not only dealing with the issues, but you can actually build relationships. You can improve understanding. All the really, really good stuff that happens in relationships comes from being able to confront what needs to be confronted. So I actually flip the term around. I talk about courageous conversations, because it does take courage, right? There's a part of it that is, oh, there's a risk that the person you are confronting, or when you are being confronted, there's a risk that it won't go as well, and the relationship could be damaged. But there's also the risk, usually when we need to confront something, it's the actual subject matter is important. It's really important to someone in that relationship. So there's a risk that it won't be taken seriously, or it won't be resolved, and you won't get, your say, or your all of that. So that's why I think just so many people have a fear of, or don't like, they say they hate confrontation. I mean, I hear that so often. And I'm like, sure, we don't want, should hate the negative confrontation, not doing it with skill and compassion and understanding and that. But I think the reason also, if we are, from whatever happened in our past, the naturally kind of more of a self-conscious person, you're so aware of the impact of yourself and what you think others are saying. And what actually underpins all of that is, as I said, is very much linked to our sense of self-worth. If we have constructed our sense of worth as based on being accepted by others, I am of no use to anyone if I don't fix them, if I don't keep them happy, if I'm so the people pleaser part, or I have no worth or value if I do something wrong, if I fail. If we base our sense of value on some kind of condition, and if that condition is being liked by another, we are less likely to confront them, because nobody likes to be confronted. And if they confront us, then our first reaction is, oh my gosh, they don't like me. I'm going to be rejected. That fear, I'm not good enough. So for me, that's part of what the negative self-consciousness kind of, how it can feed into fear of conflict. But again, if we shift that to self-awareness and you learn about healthy conflict, you can learn how to deal with it when someone comes to you, or how you present it to someone in a way that you can actually have a courageous conversation. And I'd much rather be having courageous conversations and dealing with important issues and resolving it and growing relationships than running away from conflict and, being scared of it.
And you've mentioned a few times cognitive distortions and how you use that in your coaching. Julie and I are familiar with that. For those listening who aren't familiar, can you kind of explain what that is? Because I feel like that kind of goes into this too, like changing your way of thinking when it comes to even those confrontations that you might have.
and it's actually one of the foundation. There's four foundation ideas I usually share with all my clients, and the first one is the theory around, I call it filters, that from the way we condition, so our upbringing, what school you went to, how your parents brought you up, your religion, your culture, the country you're in, what happening in the world at that time, all of those things influence your perceptions of the world, the meanings you give to things, the beliefs that you end up developing. So that those things are like filters. They're like glasses. You wear, you can have a very dirty, not so useful, dark kind of pair of glasses on. But the thing is, it's a very unconscious process. So we forget we're even wearing glasses. And then everything you look at in life is filtered from that lens, right? So your perception is darker, but blurry because the lenses are blurry. So some of the lens, if you want to think about it, the layer that's on that lens would be a cognitive distortion. They can distort cognitive as in your thinking. Your thinking is distorts the information that's coming through your filters that creates how you perceive the world. I don't know if that looks like it's making sense. So if you learn how to, you have glasses on and you can look at them and say, that's not a very useful filter. Let me see if I can clean it or peel this, dark layer off, or try a whole new pair of glasses on that are clearer, or, yellow tinted, rosy tinted glasses we talk about, but we talk about it for a reason, because those filters influence how you perceive what's going on. So yeah, I don't know if that helps to understand that. And I find it the most liberating when I learned about that, but really understood it, is that everything is just about how am I perceiving this moment? What filter is it that is allowing information into my perception and excluding other information that will then influence how I understand what's going on? So a lot of, I think, conflict comes from people having different filters, different sunglasses on, that they are missing information. They're not seeing everything that's happening, or they're interpreting what someone is doing from their filter, which wasn't that person's intention, but that filter came from maybe past relationships, that's how they've learned now. They have distorted their perception of that behavior, that they then interpreted in a way that, leads to whatever happens from it. So I don't know if that answered your question, but cognitive distortions, yeah, it's a big technical term, basically just for the way, a style of thinking that influences how you perceive the moment, that will then change the way you react to it.
Absolutely. If you ever see a movie or TV show where it shows the same scene, but from different people's perspectives,
Yes.
or like The Sixth Sense, where it flashes, once you have all the information of The Sixth Sense, it flashes back to those previous scenes and you see them completely differently. Or there's a show on right now called Kevin Can F Himself. It's the best. I love this show because it's got Annie Murphy from Schitt's Creek, and he is in sitcom land. So everything from his perspective is shown as a sitcom lighting, sitcom laughter, sitcom jokes. And then everything from her perspective is a drama. The lighting's completely different, but all the sets are exactly the same. The situation is exactly the same, but it's from her perspective, and so it's shot completely differently. And it's so amazing for me to watch that show or anything like that, where you see the same thing but through completely different awareness, different information, different ways of seeing it. It's just those are so cool. And I remember when I was in third grade, we read The True Story of the Three Little Pigs at school, and that's the three little pigs from the wolf's perspective.
Yes.
And that changed a lot of things for me. I'm amazed by that book, because even as an 8-year-old, I went, oh my gosh, this can really change everything I think I know, right? Is based on the things that I think that I know. So wonderful examples. And I love that you say courageous conversations, because a lot of times we hear like hard conversations, right? That term,
Yeah.
hard conversations. And by terming it that, we're automatically going in with the idea that this is going to be hard. And so I love the idea of courageous conversations, because courage requires fear. And so it kind of acknowledges that, like, yeah, this is a potentially fearful situation. This might trigger some fear in me, and I might be tempted to give into that fear and let that fear drive this conversation. But I'm going to acknowledge that fear, and I'm going to have courage drive this conversation. And boundaries, when it comes to that, are so important, because we need to know before we go into any confrontation, what are the outcomes that I am willing to accept? What's going to resolve this situation? Now, I don't have control over what the other person will do, but there are going to be 2 or 3 or 4 potential outcomes that I know that will resolve the situation for me. So if I say to my daughter about being late, we started charging her $1 if she got out of the house past 7:55, right? And so and that only happened like 2 days, and then she's been on it ever since. But so we said, okay, I can't be the one stressed out about about us being late in the morning, because she was not stressed out about it at all. So I said, okay, I can only control what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to tell you and give you the prompts and remind you this many times. And then after that, it's out of my hands. It is out of my control. One way or another, you're going to get to school, right? If you get to school late and it costs you $10, that's what happens, right? And so because either way, I'm not stressed now about you getting out the door into school, right? So when we go into those conversations, or if we go into a conversation uh, with a family member, and we say, "Hey, I do not like this behavior. I cannot be around if you're going to have this behavior, if you're going to continue to do that." Now I know that situation is going to be resolved one way or another. Either that person is going to change that behavior, right? Or stop that behavior, or make an effort to do so, or I'm going to remove myself from that situation. And so, one way or another, that situation is resolved. I don't have control over how it gets resolved. And definitely, there might be one that I prefer over the other. Like, yes, I would prefer that you stop that behavior, right? And that's how it gets resolved. But I don't have control over that. And so, if that is the choice that you make, I also know that that situation is going to be resolved for me, because the thing that I need to be resolved is I cannot be around while this behavior is happening, right? And so one way or another, it's going to be resolved. And I think that when we do that, we say we take that control off of the other person, right? They still have their choices and their control, but it takes the unknown out of it, because we're the ones in control of that outcome. And we know that one way or another, it is going to be resolved for us, for our part. How does the
Absolutely.
yeah, and the spotlight situation, right? That really comes in that situation, because we can go, okay, no, it's that spotlight is coming from me. So I am deciding, right, that this situation is going to be resolved one way or another. And whatever decision that the other person makes now is not their spotlight shining on me. It's my spotlight shining out and saying, no, I'm
Yeah.
able to resolve this situation within myself.
Yeah, because as you said, that is what a boundary is, right? A boundary is saying to someone, this is the line. I can't control. If you cross that line, this is going to be my response, because the only thing I can do is me. I would love you to do something different, but if you continue, then that's, then I will do what I need to do based on your behavior. And yeah, we can just hope that they do come up. I wanted to add something about that spotlight. I mean, it's called in psychology, it's called the spotlight effect. So that's where I got it from. Is we feel like it's a collection of egocentric cognitive distortions that create that feeling that everyone's looking at me and they know what's going on, versus shifting it out. And I think you've given some really good that exercise of noticing what people are wearing and all of that. But yes, if we just bring it back to then the courageous conversations, one, it's a thinking style. Like if you change your filter around a difficult conversation and you choose to call it a courageous conversation, it changes the dynamics. It changes the way you approach it. So just changing the name sometimes opens up capacity in order to engage with it. If you are going to if you're starting the confrontation, like you said, Julie, then you have to work out what your boundaries are, what works, what won't work, what is you're hoping from the situation. So do a bit of prep. And then I always, the one part I want to just add is when you go to someone, then is to invite them into that courageous conversation and give them a chance to do the prep. Sometimes, as I said, when we first ask the person, they're coming face to face with the issue. They probably didn't even know from their filters, their perspective, that it was an issue. They're just doing them, right? They don't understand the impact. That's why relationship and communication is so important, to explain the impact that it's having on you. But inviting that person says, I would like to have this conversation. Is now okay, or shall we meet tomorrow, or later? That person sometimes just needs a moment to say, oh, you know what, okay, it's like now's okay, or like, no, tomorrow would be better, because maybe they need to think about it. You don't need to go into all the details when you invite someone, but you give them a sense of what a conversation is about. And then you share your side, and being curious also. I suppose that spotlight is curious about them. What's going on for them? Are they aware? Did they know that it had that impact? Sometimes just giving that feedback changes everything for the person. No one's ever had the courage to give them that information that then gives them the chance to have the self-awareness, all the things we've been talking about, to say, oh, I didn't know that behavior has that impact, and I don't want to have that in my relationship. So yes, I will gonna do my best to change. So yeah, I love these topics because it's just so important that we speak more to each other, truthfully, honestly, clumsily, and the courage is what allows us to do that. It's you said, yeah, we don't need courage if there's no fear. So part of courage is managing the fear. And then it's about appropriate action, which I think is what you were talking about, is your boundaries. What for you is appropriate, and the appropriate action of how do I speak to this person about this issue. And the why, part of courage is it's important. The relationship's important, or the issue's important. There's some kind of bigger why to it. And that is what actually gets our courage to be activated, and to that, which is it's an inner strength to start and say, hey, we need to talk.
Yeah, some phrases that really kind of help with that too are, this is what the challenge is. This is what I'm going to do, right? If this doesn't stop, or if this doesn't change. And then, and I always like the phrasing of, I would prefer, right? Like, this is my
Yes.
preference, right? This is my preference that we work on this, we do this together, and then we move on with our lives, right? Like, that's my preference. Because the term preference allows for the autonomy of the other person. The other person can say, I don't care about that, right? I don't care about this relationship. I'm moving on, or I'm going to continue to do it as long as I want. And so it's being able to say no, but this is my preference, right? I don't prefer that we have to end the relationship. I don't prefer that, I have to build a fence. I don't prefer that, but that is what I will do if we have to go that route. And so being able to do
Yeah.
that, it builds uh, that relationship when we're saying, hey, this is what I will do. We can say, but I don't prefer that. I don't want to do that, right? But that is what I will have to do, and that stinks for everybody. So those kinds of phrasing, and then also the phrasing of, I wouldn't bring this up if it wasn't important, right? I wouldn't bring
Yeah.
this up if our working relationship wasn't important to me. I wouldn't bring this up if our family gatherings weren't important to me. And so being able to say that, again, like you said, brings up how important it is, because otherwise we wouldn't have the conversation. And so it tells the other person, no, you matter to me, which is the reason I would even bring it up to you. So those things are really, really just helpful little phrasings that help
Yes.
with the dynamic of it. And also like, hey, can we work on this together? Right. That's such a helpful phrase, because it, like you said, invites the person in, which I think is so helpful.
I was curious about goal setting. I know you said you work on that a lot through your coaching as well. And with it being the new year, I heard you mention before we started recording that you call New Year's resolutions courageous goals. So I'd like to hear where that came from and why that seems to work better than New Year's resolution and why resolutions typically fail.
So So it's interesting. I don't know how many times I've set a resolution. This year I'm going to get fit. This year I want to do, and it's a resolution. If you look at it, it's just resolving to do something. But what they found is Strava, I think, did the research where Strava is that app for running and cycling. You can log your goals, what you want to achieve, and you track yourself. And they found that by the second Friday of January, there was a massive drop, and they actually named it Quitters Day. That so many people just gave up by this 2 weeks in. Second Friday is not even, or even 2 weeks, but there's like that dip. And I know I've had it. Like everyone asks, what's your resolution? You're like, okay, this year I'm going to get fit. And I use fit because everyone can relate to that. But very few people actually end up doing something very constructive and long term that by the end of the year their fitness has totally transformed. So the difference between a resolution and a goal is there's a way more structure and thought to it than just a resolving to, just a deciding this year will be the year I change my job. This will be the year I write my book, right? So I termed it the One Courageous Goal a few years ago, and then I every year run a workshop, and we take people through a process to set one goal, because before that it was just goal setting, right? There is a structure to and a way of thinking through a goal. There's certain criteria that if you just do that thinking up front, you are way more likely to achieve your goal and not just quit, not just let it fade away and life happens, because we have all intentions. We really want to do these things. It's not that we don't have the motivation, it's that we don't have the follow through. We don't have a system in place. Atomic Habits is a wonderful book that would talk about the system that supports creating new habits. And then I went through this phase where I used to set like so many goals in every area of my life. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then it's just too much. Your brain can't hold it all. And I've really learned that where you focus your attention, that is what grows. I've had a few projects that when I just can't look at them, and I haven't looked at them for months, there's nothing happens. As soon as I focus some attention on it, stuff starts happening. So it's amazing. So just for fun, I went through a phase of like, this year I'm going to learn rock climbing. And that was my, little passion projects. And I would join a club and go to and meet people. And we did lots of rock climbing. The next year was tango dancing. And another year was the Rubik's Cube. So just fun things. And that's, I think, how the One Courageous Goal kind of, as my work with courage grew and learning more about goal setting and why I'm not achieving some of the things I say I want to do. And I think with just the coaching as a methodology, it's all kind of culminated in this idea of set one courageous goal at the beginning of the year. Yes, you're going to have other things you're going to do. There's going to be plenty of things you want to achieve. But your courageous goal must really stretch you. And it will take you a year to achieve it. It's something that if you get it right, if you do the best you can to make this a reality by December of this year, your whole life will significantly change in the most positive, wonderful way. And because of that, it needs courage. As we said, there's a risk or there's lots of work. You need to activate that capacity to do what needs to be done. So taking the best of goal setting psychology and understanding courage and kind of bringing it together into this format, my idea is to invite people to set a courageous goal for the year and then go through this well-formed goal setting process and come up with an actual action plan where you have deadlines throughout the year. You factor in accountability. You've thought it and written your goal. Because by the way, you're like 43 or something percent more likely to achieve your goal if you've just written it down. Just that act of writing it down. And then there's clarity to how you write it, that you can make it really well formed. I had a one matchstick project. I finished that project as one of my courageous goals. One of the years I did, I called it less is more. So I had a phase of I wanted to eat less sugar and less gluten in my diet. So for the first few months, it was cutting down the sugar in my coffee. And, you know what I mean? It's like, and so I had this whole phase of less gives you more energy, gives you more health. Part of that year was less clutter. So I did months of decluttering different rooms. So that was my goal. By the end of the year, I felt lighter and healthier and all of that. I had a lady last year who is a stand-up comedian. So her goal for the year was to perform her first solo one woman show overseas. And she did that. She actually wrote her own show. She did it twice in Cape Town. She got it accepted into a festival in the UK and went and did that all in the year. She created the funding for the overseas trip. But that's because she applied this process. And so that's taken her career to that next level because she's proved to herself she can do it. She's grown an audience. Can say now she's performed internationally. Anyway, so I won't go. I don't know if that explains it a bit more. So I do believe move a resolution into a goal and think through your goal, come up with it, and try and just focus on one thing for the year. Or if you don't like the year, if you want to focus on one thing for the first quarter and then focus on something else for the next quarter. But the intention is just do something and focus your energy so that you actually make a big impact. It becomes a lifestyle change, or you get that job and then you move to the next thing. So I don't know, Chrissy, did that answer? And I love it. It's so exciting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. And so that feeling of overwhelm sometimes that a big year-long goal can have can be really so mitigated by breaking that down into daily steps. And I have a brain that I have some self-awareness of. And so because of the self-awareness of what my brain likes to do, I have to break down goals into daily steps. And so on my daily list, it says, licensure step, because this year I'm getting my Illinois license. So it says one licensure step. And sometimes that is read one paragraph of the giant thing that I'm reading, right, to go through it. Sometimes that is a test question, like a practice test. Sometimes that is, oh, I got to call that person, or I got to, an email came in. Okay, great. That's my step for the day. And so one step each day, and allows me to say, okay, this is going to happen. And sometimes I'm so glad I take that first step, because the first step then makes me go, oh, no, I have to do all this other stuff. But that one step did help in putting together the plan for all those next steps. And then I go, okay, I don't have to sit here and worry that I have to do 25 new steps, because in 25 days, all of those steps will be done. Um, I just had it with I when I have to clean out my refrigerator, right, and wash all the shelves and everything, that always was such an overwhelming thing to me, and I hated it so much. And so now, when it comes time to do that, every day on my morning list says one refrigerator step, which means like one drawer. I'm going to clear out one drawer and wash that. I'm going to clear out one shelf and wash that and put it back. And then by the end of the week, the whole fridge is clean. But if I sit down on a Saturday morning and say, I'm going to clean this fridge, I can't do it. My brain will not allow me, right, to move forward through those steps. And so breaking those goals down into those steps, and truly being able to work with our brain on what our brain thinks that we can manage and do, and goes, well, yeah, I can do one shelf, right? I can do that, no problem.
Yes.
But we get maybe hung up on like clean the fridge is like, that's an undoable task. Right? So I love that example. And New Year's resolutions come with so many different kind of cultural attachments to it sometimes too, that my husband and I decided to add a step to our morning checklist. And we said, we got to start it before New Year's. So we started it on December 28th, because I said, we cannot start this on January 1st. We got to start it, right now. And that was, again, just because there are some of those challenges with the idea of a New Year's resolution. If you've had previous times where you didn't meet your resolution, right, and all of that, that can all kind of compound. And so being able to say, like, nope, we're starting on December 28th. This is not a New Year's resolution. This is a new thing that we're doing, and it happens to be around the new year, was super helpful to kind of tricking ourselves into doing that and continuing it. So,
well, it goes back to those filters we were saying, the name you give to something, whether you call it a difficult conversation, a confrontation, a conflict, or a courageous conversation, changes how you engage with it. So we don't need to get stuck up on names. Resolutions, so many people just, as you say, they give up. I don't do resolutions. So yeah, changing it to some other name. So I've coined the one courageous goal as a term. And part of that process is, if you don't like the word goal, change it. So that lady I said, the comedian, she called it her mission for the year. Mission gave her, was the word, and that worked for her. So yeah, and I love that, just doing it a few days before, because then you're actually committing to it. It sounds more like a lifestyle change, like as you said, it's a daily habit you want, versus this New Year resolution that fades in a couple days because life happens and we haven't committed to it fully. We've just like, oh, it's the new year, that's what we do. It's resolved to do something, and they never do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had a couple times already this month where we've said, okay, but we did it on December 28th. And that week between the 25th and New Year's Day is like, you're not supposed to do anything that week, right? So we're like, but if we did it during Christmas break, we can do it today.
We can do it today. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm Telana Simpson, and I need a counselor.
Wonderful. And Telana can be found at www.innercoaching.co.za. And you can also look up her her ebook there as well.
Yes.
Consciously Shine, Overcoming Self-Consciousness. So that idea of that light that we are shining outward as we're consciously shining. It's beautiful. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us